Final Fantasy XVI is the latest game to use the historical realism excuse to exclude black characters. Good. In fact, I hope that this was a decision made consciously and explicitly to piss you off, PC Gamer. That's what I hope. Now, granted, the more realistic explanation is probably the one the developer actually gave to you, namely that they were focused on an extraordinarily small and limited European-inspired setting, and that they considered that silly little things like personality, personal motifs, beliefs, etc. might be more important in a role-playing game than the pigmentation of the character's skin. But I hope that's not the case. I fervently do. Imagine being this guy, right? You're a Japanese game developer who's making a role-playing game, and you decide to go to speak to PC Gamer. Now, first and foremost, Mr. Yoshida here, Naoki Yoshida, that is your first mistake. You went to speak to PC Gamer. You were sat opposite a games journalist who has probably been receiving soy via IV drip since he was old enough to fall over. And so, of course, he is going to look you in the eyes and say, oh well, all that game stuff is well and good, but get that out of here. We're gonna speak about race now, Mr. Yoshida. Are you prepared? A heavy sigh later, and yes, he is. So this is a difficult question, he said, but not one that was unexpected. Yes, again, I'm sure there's 1,000 Final Fantasy YouTube channels out there that you could go to get better, more widespread, and less racially motivated coverage. Just don't talk to PC Gamer, and you'll probably avoid this entirely, yes? Right, in case you're unaware of the story behind this, they went to PC Gamer thinking that it's some kind of enthusiast site, some kind of hobby thing that had to do with PCs and video games. Well, that was a very foolish thing of you to think, frankly. And so he was sat down to talk about the race, and he knows there is no right answer. He's completely aware of that fact, because no, there aren't any black people in the setting. Why? Well, he mentions it is because it takes place here, on an incredibly isolated island landmass, miles away from anything in a world where there are no phones, there is no internet, there is no aeroplane travel. This is a small and extraordinarily isolated culture. Therefore, you are probably only going to see, well, weebs. It's a Final Fantasy game after all. But that wasn't good enough, and an article has now been written to debunk this, for you see, because your historical realism, that's not an excuse anymore, it's a terrible excuse, you see, because, you know, there's dragons. There's dragons, don't you see? God, literal goddamn NPCs, every last single solitary. Okay, Andy Chalk, you are a pre-programmed script. That is all you are, in my opinion. This is the only excuse. Like, you could at least gone like, oh, in a world where NECAs come up from the ground. Okay, I would have given you some points for creativity at least, but every single time it's like, well, of course there should be black people in this fantasy world. There are dragons. What, are black people and dragons linked somehow, inexplicably? Can we not have one without the other? And if that is the case, where are the Africans hiding all of the dragons? Because, frankly, I find it extraordinarily unfair that they're hogging them, you know? I think we need to go back to Africa and see if we can't dig them back up again. Clearly, colonialism missed something. But no. The point is, of course, that he tries to make the argument to, oh, well, you see, there were Moors in Africa. They were just kind of living throughout the Iberian Peninsula. Living, as in invading, but again, hey, details. And he does mention it, to his credit. And yeah, you are correct. There were invaders in Europe, absolutely, that set up invader conclaves, which is, I suppose, why there should be a lot more white people in the Woman King as well, but details. And again, it doesn't even matter in a fantasy world, because anyway, the usual argument, there are dragons, therefore they could have made up anything they wanted. True, absolutely correct. The creator here, Naoki Yoshida, if he was a race-obsessed lunatic like yourself, could simply have said that, well, whenever someone is born, the gods spin a wheel and land upon the color. Violet, pink, purple, magenta, black, brown, orange, God only knows. But they didn't. Instead, they have created a world, and a part of creating a world is creating rules for that world. You might have dragons, and that will then be a rule. The dragons exist. If the dragons one day disappear, something weird has clearly happened. You might have enormous two-legged walking mechas, themselves a bit of a physical impossibility most of the time, not to mention operating the goddamn things, which is going to require some ludicrously advanced technology. But so long as they exist, they exist. If this, in this case, is a tiny little isolated island community that has to deal with the blight, the spreading corruption, well, then it's a tiny little isolated island community that has to deal with the blight. In other words, not a very good tourist destination, and one that isn't going to be seeing a lot of international travel or trade. And if there is going to be a black or brown or Arab character, then they're probably just going to be somebody in the cities, a trader, a merchant, a traveling, vendor, somebody who arrived there to do business, for example. But, of course, again, that's not good enough, because... And what is the reason? Okay, well, you need a black character. Well, why? Well, because you need a black character. Aha. Racist. That's what you're saying here. God, this modern day obsession with race. And the best part too is, of course, the question also comes up, specifically, remember Ariel, that whole thing, Little Black Mermaid? That too was like, well, of course she's a black mermaid. It's a fantasy setting. You can just make up whatever you want. That's the key disconnect. As somebody who does a little bit of creative stuff myself, right? When you create a setting, you need to outline why things are the way they are. Take 40k, for example. The reason why the salamanders are all coal pitch black is not because they are diversity hires. It is because their world is constantly scorched by extraordinarily high ultraviolet rays, to the point where this managed to affect their primarch, Vulcan, and actually affect his gene seed, to the point that now, even if somebody as white as myself were to become a salamander, they'd still end up pitch black, because the usual mechanisms within the gene seed that govern their pigmentation's ability to react to the sun, in other words, on a desert world, they're all going to be deeply tanned, and on an ice world, they're all going to be pale shit, simply doesn't function in them anymore. That is an in-universe reason for an effect that has happened to a specific faction. In the same case here, if you have dragons, you've got dragons. If you don't have dragons, you don't have dragons. And if you don't have people of a specific skin color, no matter how much PC Gamer might whinge at you for it on this island, well, then you don't. And I love the whole thing too here. So they specifically mention people who are complex and diverse in their natures, backgrounds, beliefs, personalities, and motivations, he said. People whose stories we can resonate with. There is diversity and velahista. Diversity that, while not all-encompassing, is synergistic with the setting we've created and is true to the inspiration from which we are drawing. Now that's a fine attempt at a sidestep there, my friend, but you know it's not going to be good enough. Final Fantasy has always been a pretty white series. But even so, Yoshida's response to the question of diversity is, as he predicted, disappointing. Now again, it's like, you're writing for a PC gaming magazine. You are writing about a JRPG, a heavily story-focused setting, and the idea that they are focusing on diversity in nature, background, belief, personalities, and motivations, and not diversity in skin color alone, really should tell you something. Like, this should be a moment where you as a person go, hold on, why am I so obsessed with a character's skin color? Why is that the only thing I can think of? That's weird. Doesn't that basically make me the same as some kind of racist? Yes, PC Gamer, it does, because it is the only thing you seem to care about. Now, on the bright side, This has really been a bit of a flash in the pan. Kotaku wrote an article going, yikes, because they don't have any actual argument beyond... I bet you, I haven't read it because it's Kotaku, give me a break. Like, this is enough of a subterranean fruit, okay? This already is a potato. Kotaku, I'd have to dig for that bastard. I would have to wrest that out of the grips of Beelzebub himself. That's how far underground it is. But I bet you, it too included the line, there are dragons, so why can there not be black people? But again, the good part is, nobody gives a shit anymore. Nobody cares. Like, okay, you're gonna have a whinge, you're gonna have a whine. Even the guy himself just sighs and goes, this is a difficult question, because I know what you're gonna say. No matter what I do. And by God does he try to dodge. He really does. You know, he even goes on, the answer I have is going to be a little bit disappointing to you specifically. Our design concept from the early stage of development has always heavily featured medieval Europe, incorporating historical, cultural, political, and anthropological standards that were I can't speak English. Prevalent at the time, Yoshida said. When deciding on setting those best suited to the story we want to tell, the story of a land beset by blight, we felt that rather than create something on a global scale, it was necessary to limit the scope to a single landmass, one geographically and culturally isolated from the rest of the world, in an age without airplanes, telephones, and television or telephones. You can tell, he was thinking about this answer for a very long time, because he knew it was gonna come, and it still did him absolutely no good. Again, Yoshida, don't talk to PC Gamer. Seriously, I'm sure there are plenty of other people who will give you all the coverage in the world without asking you about the race of your characters. Maybe they'll ask something about their motivations. Oh, out of left field question, I know, yet nevertheless, perhaps one that might be more worth answering. God. Mainstream gaming media. Long and fiercely may it burn. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.